Please welcome Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Well, it is a great day and a thrill to welcome back to Illinois and to the city of Chicago our president, President Biden, coming back to the city of big shoulders, the capital of the center of the nation, the great global city of Chicago. To welcome back to Illinois and to the city of Chicago our president, President Biden, coming back to the city of big shoulders, the capital of the center of the nation, the great global city of Chicago. Alongside great Illinois leaders like Senator Tammy Duckworth, Representative Danny Davis, and Mayor Brandon Johnson, as well as our senior Senator Dick Durbin, we're here today to celebrate the truly remarkable economic progress we've seen over the president's first 30 months in office. Progress that has brought resilience, equity, and prosperity to the entire nation, especially to working families. A thriving economy rests on building out a strong middle class and establishing an abundance of good-paying jobs and opportunities for all Americans, and no one knows that better than President Joe Biden. Here in Illinois, jobs are up, new business creation is up, and unemployment is down. And right here in the city of Chicago and in the region, we are near a record low unemployment rate. This massive economic recovery from a pandemic recession, along with Illinois Democrats' fiscally responsible budgeting, has helped put Illinois on its best fiscal footing in more than a quarter century. We've paid down debt, we've balanced our budgets, received 8 credit upgrades, and surpassed $1 trillion in GDP. Thanks to the president's hard work bringing bipartisan consensus in Washington, for the first time in generations, the nation is rebuilding our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, rail, waterports, airports, and broadband internet are once again becoming the envy of the world thanks to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Thank you, President Biden. And in Illinois, we were ready for it with our own Rebuild Illinois capital plan, and that has meant that we are one of the top recipients of federal infrastructure investment. Hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created and supported here in Illinois because of the IIJA and Rebuild Illinois. President Biden made us the envy of the world when he led the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which has brought clean energy and climate action to the forefront and once again created millions of jobs across the nation. And together with Illinois' Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, we will reach 100% clean energy production by 2045. President Biden has put real meaning behind the words "Made in America." Manufacturing right here in the United States is growing for the first time in half a century. We are makers here in Illinois. We are people who take pride in our work. And today, American workers have more job opportunities and can earn a better wage because President Biden cares about upward mobility, about job creation, empowering our people, and supporting American families. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership, for restoring the promise of the American dream. We welcome you to the great state of Illinois with open arms and with gratitude. And on behalf of all of our people, we can't wait to welcome you back for the Democratic National Convention next summer. Thank you.
Please welcome Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Well, what's going on? How you all feel this afternoon? Well, thank you so much to our incredible governor for those remarks and, of course, for your leadership in the great state of Illinois. It is my distinct honor to welcome back again President Biden to the city of Chicago, as we all know, the greatest city in the entire world. We are pleased to have you here today, Mr. President, because as long as I'm mayor, there's no place better aligned with your economic vision than the city of Chicago. In fact, it's a vision that speaks to the very soul of our city. As evidence, just look at all of my union siblings that are here today before you, Mr. President. And so I want to give a special shout out to the labor movement, because as you all know, Chicago is the union town. So much so that they elected one of their own to represent the entire city of Chicago, a card-carrying CFL member, CTU Local 1. The soul of Chicago is a city that honors and invests in working people, because even with a glistening skyline, a gorgeous lakefront, and iconic food, our people are still Chicago's best asset. And that's why, like you, Mr. President, Chicago recognizes the value of investing in people. Like you, we know it takes investments to create the well-paying job opportunities that will ultimately revitalize the families and neighborhoods, not just for today, but for our future. We know that the new manufacturing jobs and high-growth industries will create pathways to the middle class and build our nation's infrastructure. Like you, Mr. President, we know that new investments in universal high-speed broadband will unlock the potential of every single community, especially our young people and our students. Now, many of you know that I'm a former middle school teacher. I taught 7th and 8th grade, mostly because I know no matter what I do, I get to go to heaven for free. But as a middle school teacher in Chicago, I've seen the effects of neighborhoods being disinvested in. And I know what it's like to have students who lack the access or resources that are needed to succeed. And that is why my administration is committed to working alongside of you, Mr. President, in making sure that we are doing the greatest act of all, and that's loving our people enough to invest in our people. And finally, by investing in our people, we are providing the full force of government to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. Mr. President, the investments you are announcing today will help us fulfill that vision for our city. A city where no one should be too poor to live in one of the richest cities, in one of the richest countries, at the wealthiest time in the history of the world. Every single resident can flourish regardless of where they live, who they love, or where they come from. And that's what makes the city of Chicago the greatest city in the United States of America. I look forward to working with you to continue transforming our economy in accordance with our vision of justice and opportunity for all. So thank you again, President Biden, for hanging out in the city of Chicago today. Your leadership is certainly well received here, and thank you for your leadership for this great nation. God bless the city of Chicago. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please welcome Illinois United States Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Well, hello, everyone. I just watched the president arrive in a Black Hawk helicopter, so I'm super happy right now. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I know we're all eager to hear from the president himself. But just let me start off by saying, finally. Finally, after 4 years of instability and unpredictability, 4 years in which only the folks cashing the biggest paychecks were allowed to catch their breath or catch a break, finally, we have a president who understands that the best way to build the economy is from the middle out, not the top down. Finally, we're able to debate and pass, sign into law, bills that don't just look after executives in corner suites, but looks after folks forced to work double shifts too. And finally, we're working to enact policies that lift up the worn-down parent driving that beat-up used car, not just the CEO who takes his private jet to work. You know, every day in Washington, we Democrats in the Senate are grateful to work side by side with President Biden to build an economy which all Americans, no matter their tax bracket, have to play by the same rules. An economy in which employers who treat their workers fairly are rewarded, while companies that try to skirt the rules are held accountable. An economy that both rights the wrongs of the past and prepares us for a fast-moving future. An economy that prioritizes investments in the areas the country have been left behind for far too long. It's clear that the down payments that previous generations in this country have paid dividends for all of us here today. With every bridge that they fortified and every telephone line hung, they made our countries physically and figuratively stronger. But by the time President Biden came into office, the once smooth roads that connect our country had become dilapidated. The once cutting-edge grid lines that are supposed to power our nation has become outdated. So it falls on us here now to renew those kinds of investments that past generations began. Because the gains that we would get wouldn't just mean less bumpy drives down the interstate for those of us who commute in. Further investment in our infrastructure would better connect every pocket of our country. It would help us stay a step ahead of our global competitors in this new, ever-changing international economy. It would allow us to lend a hand to farmers and producers who right now have a really hard time moving their goods to market. And it would create better paying jobs, growing the middle class and our economy in one fell swoop. Those are just some of the reasons why I'm so thrilled that President Biden is making this announcement today. Why I'm thrilled to get to work tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, better interconnecting our nation. And there's no better place to talk about the center of the nation, the place that interconnects and links all sides of this great nation than Illinois and the great city of Chicago. We will help enable America to reach her full potential by allowing all of America to be connected. And it starts right here in the great state of Illinois. Thank you.
Please welcome Representative Danny Davis of Illinois, 7th Congressional District.
Good morning, Illinois. And I want to thank you, Mr. President, for once again having the opportunity to welcome you to the greatest state in the United States of America, led by an outstanding governor, Governor J.B. Pritzker, with the great county government led by Tony Freckleton, and of course a new mayor who has brought hope, new energy, new vision, and new potential to the city. Mayor Brandon Johnson. I had a hard time getting here this morning because I had to change directions 5 times because everywhere I went, streets were being paved with the new infrastructure money that you brought to Chicago. But I really want to tell you I love your bottoms-up approach to community redevelopment. I love the idea, Mr. President, that you've raised the earned income tax credit for the lowest income people in our community. The child tax credits have reduced child poverty by 50%. That in and of itself is enough to get one re-elected. But I want to thank you for the comprehensiveness of your view. You have given America not only a new hope, but you've fought back all of the opportunities that those on the other side have tried to cut Social Security, can you imagine? Tried to cut the Affordable Care Act, unbelievable. Tried to take away the gains that we've made. So you've done exceptionally well, Mr. President, but we ain't through yet. We need you for 4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years for President Joe Biden.
Please welcome Illinois United States Senator Dick Durbin.
Every politician in Illinois says a little prayer that they never have to follow Danny K. Davis. My prayer is usually answered, but not this morning. It's an honor to be here and to welcome President Biden back to Chicago. But it's not a new trip for him. He's been here many times. He knows Chicago is a city that has a can-do attitude, full of hardworking people and families. And today, with his leadership, Chicago and Illinois are definitely moving ahead. We're renovating and expanding terminals at O'Hare, replacing 100-year-old bridges along the Metro route, rebuilding locks and dams along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers so that Illinois farmers and businesses can compete. And Monday, this last Monday, I was with Governor Pritzker and the members of the Illinois congressional delegation at Union Station. We launched a new 100-mile-an-hour plus Amtrak train connecting Chicago and St. Louis. I know one Amtrak fan from Wilmington, Delaware, who would have joined our cheering section. Under President Joe Biden, we're laying the foundation for strong, sustainable economic growth. I said to the president when he got off his helicopter that I went to school many years ago and took an economics course, studied economics, macroeconomics, microeconomics. Now I'm being introduced to Bidenomics, and I like what I see. I like what it means for America. Under President Biden, we're building a strong foundation for long-term economic growth for generations to come. Middle-class families get a fair shake, and families who've been left behind get their chance to join the middle class. That's the American formula that built the strongest economy and the largest middle class the world has ever seen. For more than 40 years, though, we've heard one other point of view. The wealthiest in our country have been pushing a different approach and a mythical economic theory. They said if we just cut taxes for billionaires and big corporations, everybody's going to do just fine. But here's the truth. This top-down, trickle-down disaster of economics exploded the national debt, shuttered American factories, hollowed out our communities, and left too many families and small businesses barely hanging on. Now, after 40 years of failure, the far right wants to double down again with financial flim-flam. We're not going to stand for it. They want to slash funding for Social Security, Medicare, education, training, our police, border security, child care. The list goes on and on. They even want to cut medical research. Explain that to veterans suffering from exposure to burn pits and families struggling with cancer and other devastating diseases. There's a better way to grow the American economy. Under this president, America is investing in the middle class. And here is a fact I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else. America, among leading economies in the world, has had the highest economic growth rate since the pandemic and the lowest current inflation in the world under President Biden. With a record-breaking 13 million new jobs created under this president, including more than 440,000 in Illinois, factories are reopening, middle-class wages are going up. And Illinois thanks the president as well for a $1 billion-plus investment that he announced last week to extend reliable broadband to every corner of our state. What Franklin Roosevelt brought to America with electricity, this president is bringing with affordable, quality broadband for businesses, families, and students. Under this president, 343,000 Illinoisans now have coverage under the Affordable Care Act. Nearly 1 million are covered under the ACA Medicaid expansion, and everyone is protected from predatory loopholes by insurance companies. Under this president, America is investing in training and education, and we're protecting workers' rights to organize and join unions. This president really means it when he says he's a union president. We need to export American products, not American jobs. That's why the president pushed the CHIPS program, which means that we're going to get back in the business of making semiconductor chips, which change the future. We're interested in clean energy technology. I want to tell you a story about where I was yesterday. I was traveling all over the state, and I was downstate about 150 miles from Chicago, in Lee County, where they're replacing the original wind turbines built in 2007 with newer, more efficient American-made assemblies. It's an all-union, multi-million-dollar project. The manager told me it would not have happened without the Inflation Reduction Act, the new law the Democrats passed in Congress and the president signed. That is just the beginning. We expect 300,000 Illinois families to install solar panels because of that same law. A greener America with reduced energy costs for working families. I'm going to close on a personal note. I've been honored to join the president in bringing more than 130 new federal judges to America's judiciary. He made this commitment, and the Senate Judiciary Committee heard the call, and we, as I said, have approved more than 130 judges, and we're not done yet. We want women and men who will bring balance to our courts and reflect the true diversity of our nation. President Biden, I thank you for your friendship, your leadership, your vision for America, but most of all, I thank this president because he brought respect back to the White House. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Illinois Executive Chairman and founder of Clayco, Bob Clark.
Wow. Friendly audience, I hope. Good morning. It's still morning for 6 more minutes. As they said, I'm Bob Clark. 35 years ago, I started Clayco in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we're a nationally fully integrated design builder. We do development, architecture, engineering, really a very integrated company. The company is growing very rapidly, and I'm happy to say that we're still adding about 40 project managers or engineers every month. It's a lot of fun to see the new faces in the company. Moving Clayco to Chicago 10 years ago was a game changer for us. We love working in Chicago. We find it to be one of the most resilient, dynamic, and cost-effective big cities in the whole country. Our governor's track record is impressive, and we're very optimistic and excited about our new mayor. So it's been a tough few years with the pandemic, but we're seeing good signs. We're thrilled, in fact, at Clayco to be involved in the O'Hare expansion here in Chicago. We just broke ground on a $1.5 billion battery plant for Envision. We just broke ground on a $1.2 billion battery parts manufacturing for Intech in Indiana. The SK plant in Georgia was a $5 billion project still underway. We just broke ground on Group 14 chemical processing plant in Moses Lake, Washington. We're busy. And Samsung's new chip plant down in Tyler, Texas. All of these projects are due to the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's the new term, Bidenomics, and I'm buying into it. Investing in our workers, our communities, and the whole country. Clayco and the nation's top builders are gearing up for an American building boom not seen since World War II. We believe the Biden economy will last for decades. It's not a short-term change, and it's going to change the very fabric of American jobs. So today, I'm excited to introduce the President of the United States of America, my friend and the architect of this economy, Joe Biden.
Thank you all very much. And Bob, thank you for that introduction. Bob's been helping me for a long time. I guess he doesn't know any better. And speaking of help from a long time, a brand new guy in town, a guy who I told him that being married, I think, is the toughest job in America. They know where you live, and every time you walk in the grocery store, you get questions. But congratulations, Mr. Mayor. And I think that you've been doing a good job. Mayor Brandon Johnson. Look, there's a guy that helped me more than, I can say this without equivocation, helped me more than anybody in America get elected last time. Single person, your governor. He stepped up, he raised money, he raised support. Governor, you're the best. Thank you for being such a good friend. I really mean it. And I like hanging around with heroines like Tammy Duckworth. Tammy, God love you. You're the best, too, I tell you. But you know what? My good friend, Dick Durbin, and he is a good friend. We've worked together a long, long time in the United States Senate. He's the single most effective senator in getting things done. That's not a joke. It's not just Judiciary Committee. He's made sure that we got more judges appointed. We've appointed more African-American women to the federal bench than every other president combined. And he got the first and brightest, Justice Ketanji Brown. I said I was going to put a black woman on the court, and he put her on the court for me. He put her on the court for me. Dick, you really are the best man. And by the way, when I have questions about just about anything at all beyond the Judiciary Committee, I still call him anyway for his advice. So thank you. And Representative Danny Davis. Danny, you've been a good friend for a long time. He's always there. And to all the elected officials, member of Congress, elected officials here today, thank you. Thank you for the welcome, and welcome me to Chicago. You know, first quarter of the 20th century, the poet Carl Sandburg described Chicago as a city of big shoulders. A city of big shoulders. He was describing the big shoulders of a working-class American town who were building this city. At the same time, building the middle class. I'm here in Chicago today for the first quarter of the 21st century to talk about the economic vision for this country. The economy that grows the economy from the middle out and the bottom up instead of just the top down. When that happens, everybody does well. The wealthy still do it, everybody does well. The poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do well. We all do well. This vision is a fundamental break from the economic theory that has failed America's middle class for decades now. It's called trickle-down economics, fundamental economics, trickle down. The idea was, it's belief that we should cut taxes for the wealthy and big corporations. And I know something about big corporations. There's more corporations in Delaware incorporated than every other state in the union combined. I want them to do well, but I'm tired of waiting for the trickle down. It doesn't come very quickly. Not much trickle down at my dad's kitchen table growing up. And it's a belief that we should shrink public investment in infrastructure and public education. Shrink it. That we should let good jobs get shipped overseas. And we actually have a tax policy that encourages them to go overseas to save money. We should let big corporations amass more power while making it harder to join a union. I meant what I said when I said I'm going to be the most pro-union president in American history, and I make no apologies for it. My predecessor, if my mom were here, God bless his soul, my predecessor enacted the latest iteration of the failed theory. Tax cuts for the wealthy. It wasn't paid for, and the estimated cost of his tax cut was $2 trillion. $2 trillion. Now Republicans are at it again, pushing tax cuts for large corporations and the wealthy, and adding trillions of dollars to the deficit. Trillions. Folks, let me say it as clearly as I can. The trickle-down approach failed the middle class. It failed America. It blew up the deficit. It increased inequity. And it weakened our infrastructure. It stripped the dignity, pride, and hope out of communities, one after another, particularly through the Midwest, Western Pennsylvania, and heading west. People working as hard as ever couldn't get ahead because it's harder to buy a home, pay for college education, start a business, retire with dignity. The first time in a generation, the path of the middle class seemed out of reach. And I don't think it's hyperbole. I think it's a fact, no matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I really didn't. I now claim it, but they're the ones that used it first. I got asked by a press person this morning, getting on the helicopter in Washington, why, when I asked you about Bidenomics a long time ago, you said you didn't know what it was. I said, I didn't name it Bidenomics. I didn't realize the Economist and the Wall Street Journal did. But I think it's a plan that I'm happy to call Bidenomics. And guess what? Bidenomics is working. When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling. Supply chains were broken, millions of people unemployed, hundreds of thousands of small businesses on the verge of closing after so many had already closed. Literally hundreds of thousands on the verge of closing. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world. As Dick said, with his help, we've created 13.4 million new jobs. More jobs in 2 years than any president has ever made in 4 and 2. And folks, it's no accident. That's Bidenomics in action. Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. And there are 3 fundamental changes that we decided to make with the help of the Congress. We've been able to do it. First, making smart investments in America. Second, educating and empowering American workers to grow the middle class. And third, promoting competition to lower costs to help small businesses. Here's what I mean by all this. Under trickle-down economics, it didn't matter whether you made things as long as you helped the company's bottom line. Even if that meant seeing jobs in industries go overseas for cheaper labor. Supply chains and key products moved overseas, like China and much of Asia. The entire towns and communities, from where I live all the way out there and through the Midwest, were shut down, hollowed out. I mean, literally hollowed out. All over the country, parents have to say to their, many of you, all elected officials, heard people tell you this, had to say to their children, honey, I lost my job. We can't live here anymore. We got to move. Trickle down also meant slashing public investment on things that help drive long-term growth and helped America lead the world in innovation. We used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. By the time I came to office, that was down to 0.7%. We used to be number 1 in the world in research and development. That's what we're known for. Now we rank number 9 in the world. China decades ago was number 8 in the world. Now it's number 2 in the world. And other nations are closing in fast. We used to have the best infrastructure in the world, roads, bridges, etc. But then we fell to rated 13th best investment in infrastructure. 2 to 13. How can you have the best economy in the world without the best infrastructure in the world? How do you get product from one place to another? I was out in Pittsburgh recently, the city of bridges. Bridges collapsing all over the nation. You've seen on television, railroad bridges collapsing. Bidenomics, we're turning this around. We're supporting targeted investments. We're strengthening America's economic security, our national security, our energy security, and our climate security. I designed and we signed a bipartisan infrastructure law. It's already announced, and I heard some of the speakers before touting some of it. It's already announced 35,000 projects across the country. Think of it this way. Nearly a century ago, Franklin Roosevelt's Rural Electrification Act, rural electrification, brought electricity to millions of Americans in rural America. 70 years ago, Dwight Eisenhower launched the Interstate Highway System, the largest infrastructure project to date in history. That's what the bipartisan infrastructure law does. It will be for our kids and grandkids, only bigger. Just last week, we announced our plan to bring affordable high-speed internet to end the decade of unaffordable and inaccessible internet to every home in America, every small business in America. And to no one's surprise, it's bringing along some converts. People strenuously opposed, voting against it when we had this going on. This was going to bankrupt America. Well, there's a guy named Tuberville, senator from Alabama, who announced that he strongly opposed the legislation. Now he's hailing its passage. Here's what he said, quote, "It's great to see Alabama receive critical funds to boost ongoing broadband efforts." We're replacing every single lead pipe in this country and putting our children's health back directly. 400,000 schools, 10 million homes. We're fixing crumbling bridges, upgrading our power grid, renovating our airports and ports. And Dick, one of you talked about that, how important that is for the Great Lakes as well. Last week we opened I-95 back where I live. and you go up the East Coast. It's one of the most important links in the entire East Coast. Well, guess what? A guy driving a truck anyway, knocked down a whole bridge and the whole block, 4 lanes of the highway. I went up there, and I said, we're going to get this the #1 project to get done. Within 1 week of my being there, 2 weeks of happening, tanker trucks that crashed and caused this overpass that has 150,000 vehicles travel on it every day and 14,000 trucks. It's critical to our economy. We did it with union workers. We closed all the loopholes. We used all American products, all American materials. We used federal infrastructure projects. Made in America. Made in America. Not a slogan. It's actually happening. You know, when Roosevelt passed the legislation in the 30s about unions being able to be engaged, everybody thinks they just legalize unions. It said we should encourage unions. There was a little provision there that very few presidents paid attention to. It said, buy American. That meant that if a president was given money by the Congress to build, say, a new deck in an aircraft carrier, whatever it was, he or she was supposed to use 100% American labor and 100% American products. It hardly happened. They get exceptions down to 30%, et cetera. I changed all that. We're all now investing in key industries of the future, making targeted investments to promote domestic production of semiconductors, batteries, electric cars, clean energy. Under the trickle-down economic theory was that public investment would discourage private investment. Give me a break. We went to see a whole lot of major corporations said, are you more or less likely to invest if the government invests? Overwhelmingly. They had it backwards. They said, no, we're more likely to invest if the government invests. Public investment declined here at home. Industries that we invented started to move overseas, like semiconductors. I want to remind you, America invented these chips. Small computer chips the size of the tip of your finger that affect nearly everything in your life. From whether your cell phone functions, your automobiles can be built, refrigerators work, it goes on, into sophisticated weapon systems. It's all in that little, without that computer chip, we got a real problem. But over time, we went from producing 40% of those world chips down to 10%. Not anymore. Biden economics means industries of the future are going to grow right here at home. At home. I mean it. Not a joke. Under Bidenomics, we've already had over $490 billion in private investment commitments. $490 billion from U.S. companies and companies around the world coming to the United States of America. Working with our global partners, Americans' investments in clean energy technology are going to reduce carbon emissions, continue to lower the cost of wind. You talked about the wind farms you're talking about. You know, it's already cheaper. Wind and solar are already significantly cheaper than coal and oil. You're not going to see anybody building a new coal-fired plant in America. Not just because I'd like to pass a law to say that. It's too expensive. It doesn't work anymore. Solar power is not just here, but around the world. And we used to be the center of building these solar panels. We're coming back and doing it again. America's going to lead again. Look, it's a win for the United States and a win for the world that builds on my decision to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement on the first day I came to office. The first day. And by the way, my predecessor talked a lot about increasing manufacturing. Remember Infrastructure Week? Infrastructure Week became Infrastructure Week and week and week and week and week. It never happened. We got Infrastructure Decade done right off the bat. But in reality, construction of manufacturing facilities here on U.S. soil grew only 2% on my predecessor's watch. In 4 years, 2%. On my watch, it's grown nearly 100% in 2 years. 100%. With help of all the members of Congress that are here, and I'm not being solicitous. Look, Weirton, West Virginia, where a steel mill closed, in the beginning of this century, in 2001 or 2, in that range. It employed thousands, had thousands of good-paying jobs. They were lost. But today, with the help of the Inflation Reduction Act, a new plant's being built, building iron-air batteries, which are going to help store energy. And these batteries are going to help store energy, and it's being built on the same exact site, bringing back 750 good-paying jobs, bringing back a sense of pride and hope for the future for all the people of Weirton and surrounding areas. I believe every American willing to work hard should be able to say where they grew up and stay where they grew up. That's Bidenomics. You know, my dad used to have an expression, Joey, and I give my word, as we say. My dad was a well-read guy, never got to go to college, and a hard-working gentleman. We had dinner where we incidentally had conversation and incidentally ate. My dad used to say, remember, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. And I mean this, I give my word. He would say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck, Joey. It's about your dignity. It's about pride. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Think about it. I mean, literal sense, think about that. It's about your dignity, how you're treated, and being able to make a living. You can tell your kids it's going to be okay. The second big part of Bidenomics is empowering American workers. When I took office, unemployment was over 6%. With the American Rescue Plan, we provided relief and support directly to working-class families. Our economy came roaring back. Unemployment dipped below 4% by the end of my first year in office. Now it's been below 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years of American history. And I must admit I concentrated on, but we've seen with the help of Jesse Jackson's legacy and a lot of other people here, we've seen record low unemployment for African Americans. Record low unemployment for African Americans and Hispanic workers with disabilities. The lowest unemployment rate in 70 years for American women, and you make up half the economy and probably 2/3 of the brain. No, really, think about it. To pause for a second, when I was trying to get, name me a time when you thought any Democrat would get the endorsement within a week. Every single environmental group out there, the AFL-CIO, the women's groups. I mean, here's the deal. When I sat with the AFL-CIO, when I sat with the IBW, starting when I ran last time, I said, here's the deal, though. I'm going to be the most pro-American, most pro-union president in history, but you've got to employ more women, you've got to attract more African Americans, and you've got to attract more minorities. They have. They're going around. It's beginning to change. In every industry. Anyway, I go to these sites where they're trained. And by the way, the other thing I've told labor guys, you got to brag a little bit more about what you do. You realize to get a license to be an electrician in this town or any other, you got to essentially go to 4 years of college. You have to go through an apprenticeship that takes you 4 years to 5, depending, or you can't get a job. You get paid a little bit, but you can't get your license to be an electrician, a labor electrician, until that happens. Look, pay for low-wage workers has grown at the fastest pace in over 2 decades. Full employment means workers, especially low-wage workers, having more bargaining power to demand good pay, to secure good jobs. And this is a thing that isn't consistent with whether people think that we're moving in the right direction. Job satisfaction, based on every poll, is at a 36-year high. More people are satisfied with their jobs than any time in 36 years. And the shame of working-age Americans in the workforce, the share of them, is the highest it's been in 20 years. Remember what they were saying? Biden policy isn't working. He's just paying people not to work. People on the sidelines. Well, guess what? Every single day in 4 years before I took office, you may remember, I took a lot of criticism in my presidency. Republicans charged me we're encouraging people to stay home, not work. Well, they were wrong. The evidence is clear. Americans are back to work who've been on the sidelines, and they want to come back. And we're going to continue this progress and make sure every American has the training and education to participate in this new economy. We've increased Pell Grants, made landmark investments in historic black universities. We've invested more in registered apprenticeships and centered a career technology education program than any previous administration in American history. Because of this new economy, we don't need everyone to have a four-year degree. It's great if you can get one. We're trying to make it easier for you to get one. But you don't need it to get a good-paying job anymore. Think of this. How many of you remember going back to high school and they had shop class? And they had classes where people could learn if they were interested in working with their hands. They don't have them very much anymore, anywhere around the country. Well, my wife teaches at a community college, full-time still. She has an expression. She said, any country that outcompetes us, out-educates us, will outcompete us. We're not going to let that happen. That's why we're investing significantly in education. I'm determined to keep fighting for universal pre-K and free community college. We're also fighting to make child care more affordable because we know one benefit is that it opens up significant opportunities for parents to be able to go back and join the workforce. We're also making it easier to empower workers by making it easier to join a union. As I said, I promised to be the most pro-union president in history, and I tell business leaders all the time, our union workers are the best in the world. It takes 4 to 5 years in that apprenticeship. It's like going to college. They'll do the right job on time. Long-term costs for business is less. You know, addressing the 40-year decline in unionization by supporting project labor agreements, collective bargaining, prevailing wage laws. That's the reason today America's support unions is higher than it's been in 60 years. 60 years. And by the way, I met with the Business Roundtable and others. They said, why am I so pro-union? I said, because it helps you. It really does. Think about it. The total cost of a major project goes down when you have the best workers in the world doing it. Not a joke. It's true. It lasts longer. You don't have to worry about whether that socket's going to work. Look, young people are organizing new companies and industries. You know, I've indicated to labor leaders they must expand their ranks. As I said, more women, more minorities. That's what they got to do. Third part of Biden economics is promoting competition. Because when companies have to compete on a level playing field, they have to work harder to attract customers and recruit and retrain workers. Some of you business people in here know that well. But under the trickle-down economic theory, 3/4 of U.S. industries grew more consecrated. I'm thinking I didn't go to Mass. They were moving to diminish competition. Well, that may have been made things easier for big corporations. But for everybody else, it made it harder, more expensive. It got harder for small businesses to compete. It stifled integration. It reduced wages for workers. And it made our supply chains more vulnerable. So, folks, that's been the Republican plan so far. Good for big business, bad for everybody else. It's not even that good for big business anymore. When I came to office with a very different plan, a limited concentration of power at the expense of consumers. The cops are back in the beat enforcing antitrust laws. My administration is working to crack down on what we used to call non-compete agreements. We still call them that. These prevent 30 million Americans, from security guards to retail workers, from walking across the street to the same kind of business and getting a higher pay, getting $5 more a week or $10 more a week. Non-compete agreements? It's one thing to have non-compete agreements when you're dealing with trade secrets. It's another thing when you're doing the same thing of flipping a hamburger and you're going to get 5 cents more by walking across the street to a different place. We promoted, we're supporting small businesses. You know, Vice President Harris has prioritized providing support and capital for small business owners, including for rural minorities and women entrepreneurs, including through a brand new program that's already helping deliver billions of dollars in growth capital to small businesses in every state. We've seen a record 10.5 million applications, 10.5 million applications for folks looking to start a small business just in the last 2 years, 10.5. Every one of those applications is an application of hope. Hope. Competition also means lowering costs for consumers. Bringing down inflation remains one of my top priorities. Today, inflation is less than half of what it was a year ago. And that inflation caused by Russia and by the war in Ukraine and by what was going on. But we knew we had to do more. There's more than one way to bring down costs. Another expression my dad used to use, for real. He'd say, Joey, he said, at the end of the month, the question is, after you pay all your bills, do you have just a little left for breathing room? Just a little less for breathing room. All your bills paid. Do you have anything left? Well, inflation eats into that, obviously. But guess what? Bringing down the cost of medication goes a long way to giving you a little more. That's why, through the Inflation Reduction Act, we finally gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices like the VA does now. We've been trying to get this done, Dick and I, for decades in the Senate. This time, we finally beat Big Pharma for the first time. You know, same drug made by the same American company, sold in Chicago, is more expensive than that same drug sold in Toronto, Great Britain, France, Germany, any city you can name, for real. Now seniors on Medicare are paying as much as who were paying $400 a month for insulin last year are now paying $35 a month. Because guess what? You know how much it costs to make that insulin? 10 TEN dollars. Package it, maybe 12 total. And the guy who invented the insulin didn't even ask for a patent because he wanted everybody to have access to it. We're just finishing the first round of negotiating drug prices. And we'll save the taxpayers this year $160 billion. That's like a tax cut. Lowers the cost of prescription drugs and it lowers the federal deficit as well. We're expanding health care coverage for more Americans, building on Barack's Affordable Care Act. You know why we're doing that? I'm proud to strengthen that act, saving average families $800 a year on their health care premiums. We're also fighting to end junk fees. Most people don't think of it that way. Here's what a junk fee is. They can add up to hundreds of dollars a month for a family. Like that extra fee when you say, I want my child to sit next to me when I take him to see Grandpa on the West Coast. It's not listed now. They're listing it now. Hotel resort fees. You don't realize, you're not told they're going to be, that ad in television? Mine is $200, his is $180. Well, guess what? Or the one that bothers me the most is overdraft fees for banks. The banks made $7.7 billion a year on overdraft fees. You overdraft and check, you get a penalty. It's one of the leading bank presidents, God love him, he's passed away, but he had a yacht. The name of the yacht was Overdraft. Swear to God. Well, guess what? There are going to be no more overdraft fees. Folks, we're doing all this, reducing the deficit at the same time. Just in my first 2 years in office, my team and I have reduced the deficit by $1.7 trillion, more than any president has. Just in 2 years. And the budget agreement I negotiated without having to give away anything of consequence reduced the deficit by another $1 trillion. You know, reversing 40 years of Republican trickle-down economics that helped few but hurt the middle class, it's going to take some time. But we're in a place where some big pieces, and we're moving in a direction where we can get some more done and people will see it. What I'm doing, and I knew I'd have to do this, all those major legislations we pass, people go, that's great, but it takes time to get it out in the field. It takes time for them to see it. And I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. I'm here to say we have a plan that's turning things around incredibly quickly. But we have more work to do. For example, does anyone here think the federal tax system is fair? Raise your hand. No matter how much money you make. We're going to make it fair by eliminating loopholes for crypto traders, hedge fund managers. Big oil made $200 billion last year and got a $30,000 tax break, $30 billion tax break. We're going to get billionaires to pay up a little bit, at least the minimum tax. You know, when we began, there were 750, before the pandemic, 750 billionaires in America. Now there are 1,000. You know how much their average tax is? They pay federal tax? 8% taxes. No billionaire should pay lower tax rate than a school teacher, a firefighter, a cop. I mean, this is... I'm not talking about the old days of 70% tax. I'm talking about a fair shot. If they just paid the top tax rate that exists now, which is 130%, we'd raise billions and billions of dollars, lowering the deficit, allowing us to pay for so much more we have to do. That's the next phase of this fight, making the tax code fair for everyone, making the wealthy, the super wealthy, and big corporations begin to pay their fair share without raising taxes at all on the middle class. I made a commitment when I got elected. No one in America making under $400,000 will ever have to pay a single penny more in federal taxes as long as I'm president. And I've kept that promise. And $400,000 is a lot of money where I come from. Let me close with this. When I came to office, I had a fundamental decision to make. We're going to continue trickle-down economic as a policy that's failed time and again, that grew inequality, that saw jobs go overseas, that saw, and you've seen it out here, towns hollowed out. I ran on the promise I was going to end this, and that I began to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. We're not going to continue down the trickle-down path as long as I'm president. This is the moment we're finally going to make a break and move away from an economy that has existed in a fundamentally different direction. Here's a simple truth about trickle-down economics. It didn't represent the best of American capitalism, let alone America. It represented a moment where we walked away, and how many in this country, from how this country was built, how this city was built. Bidenomics is about the future. Bidenomics is just another way of saying, restore the American dream, because it worked before. It's rooted in what we've always worked best at in this country, investing in America, investing in Americans. Because when we invest in our people, we strengthen the middle class, we see the economy grow, that benefits all Americans. That's the American dream. 40 years of trickle-down limited that dream, except for those at the top. Too many, for too long, have seemingly suggested that it's only available if you have a 4-year college degree. You can work at a teaching or work at a tech center. These new factories that are opening, these fabs that are opening for semiconductors, without a college degree, you're going to make $100,000 to $130,000 a year working in those fabs. $100,000 to $130,000 a year. But I believe that every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job no matter where they are. In the heartland, in small towns, in every part of this country, to raise their kids on a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. That's Bidenomics. I think the economic philosophy is not going to restore the American dream that we have now, that philosophy, but this new one will. It's going to help, and I think it's going to help lessen the division in this country by bringing us back together. It makes it awful hard to demagogue something when it's working, although they do it all the time. I've long said, and I mean this, I was on the Tibetan Plateau with Xi Jinping. I traveled 17,000 miles with him. I've spoken with him more than any other head of state because it started when I was vice president, and President Hu was the president, and he was the vice president. We knew he was going to be successful. It was inappropriate for Barack to spend that time with him, but I spent a lot of time with him. I met alone with him, just he and I, and a simultaneous interpreter 68 times, 68 hours. 68 times, more than 68 hours. By the way, I turned in all my notes. This is the God's truth. He asked me, we're in the Tibetan Plateau, and he asked me, he said, can you define America for me? I said, yes, in one word, and I meant it. Possibilities. Possibilities. We're a land of possibilities. And I told him it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Never. And I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future. I swear to God. I've never been more optimistic. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.